Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in this world. Welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm your moderator for today's event, Charlene O'Hanlon. Welcome. We have a great webinar on tap today, as always, but before we do get started, I would like to go over just a few housekeeping items. First of all, today's webinar is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of today's event, you will be able to access it on demand following the event. You'll be receiving a link via email to the webinar on demand. It'll also be posted on the DevOps.com website. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if you have a question for our speakers today, at any time, just go ahead and use the control panel and submit your questions, and then we'll take a few minutes before the end of the event to go over your questions. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. Today's webinar, 5 Steps to Achieving the Single Pane of Glass Across DevOps. That includes APM, NPM, metrics, and logs. It's sponsored by Influx Data. Our guests today, are Russ Savage, who's the product manager, and Chris Cirillo, who is director of product marketing at Influx Data. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having us today. We're really excited to get the chance to talk with everyone today.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over and let you guys do your thing.
Wonderful. So thanks everybody for joining Russ and I. We're really thrilled to be able to get a chance to present to you our ideas of how to achieve the single pane of glass with a 5-step process. So our agenda today is we're just going to review the model, the steps that we've articulated, and it's based on conversations with our customers and our own experience with our Influx Cloud SaaS service, as well as our previous experience at various SaaS and application vendors. And then we'll talk a little bit about why Influx Data, and then we'll actually articulate some of the customer examples so that you can see where a lot of our thinking came from, and then we'll end it with a Q&A. And as was articulated, please put your questions in the Q&A or the chat panel, and Russ and I we love to get those answered, and we will get them answered by the end of the presentation. So a little bit about us, and I'm going to go ahead and let Russ introduce himself first, since he's first in the slide.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Russ Savage. I'm a product manager here at Influx Data. I've been working in data in all types, big and small, for the past 10 years, and really excited to be here with you guys.
And my name is Chris Cirillo, and I work in product marketing here at Influx Data, and I have a wide experience of building a number of different SaaS solutions, as well as building a SaaS monitoring solution that was focused on the infamous Oracle Red Stack. So been there, done that. I know what you guys are feeling. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning, Russ and I are going to hopefully give you some insights into a nice process that's going to help you guys achieve that single pane of glass and get to the point where you can actually be able to do some proper forecasting for your application or SaaS. But before we go into that, we want to just describe a little bit about what Influx Data is. So I'll let Russ do that for us.
Yeah, so Influx Data was founded in 2013. Our headquarters are in downtown San Francisco, which is where I am right now. And really, our mission is to be the modern engine for metrics and events, right? And so, when our founder Paul Dix was looking and starting to build a database for time series, he was using existing databases, and they really just weren't up to the task, right? There wasn't a really great way for rapidly ingesting and egressing data that really focused on telemetry and DevOps monitoring. So, really our focus is around building a really powerful purpose-built time series database, and around that bring a bunch of different tools that really increase what we call a time to awesome. So really making sure that our customers, our open source users and our customers are, can really jump in and quickly see value from our platform. So, we're an open source company. We have 110,000 unique active deployments, over 360 customers, including IBM, Cisco, PayPal, and really strong open source community, which is where a lot of our focus is. We have 12,000 GitHub stars, and anyone anyone on the call who has looked at our GitHub repo or reported issues or helped us fix some, we really appreciate it. So really focusing on community, and that's where we drive a lot of our value from.
And I think not only do we drive a lot of our value from that, but I think Russ will agree with me that it's probably the most exciting part of working at Influx Data is, having such a vibrant and active community serves as not only as inspiration for us and our engineers, but they actually contribute as well. And it just feels like everybody's really trying to make the best of this metric collection system.
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons I decided to join Influx. I really love the open source aspect and the focus on community, and so it's really important for me.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the landscape, and you guys are probably actually feeling this as well. And so there's actually 3 massive changes that are happening here. And so the first one, and I know not everybody may be quite there yet. I think Russ and I have talked to a lot of customers where there are a number of people that have made that switch from a big monolithic application to adopting microservices fully, going down the continuous delivery route and actually deploying changes, maybe on an hourly basis. But in some cases, we also hear that people aren't quite there yet, but they do have plans to go down that path. But the thing that's important to note is when you do make that change from going to that monolithic infrastructure to supporting a microservices type of architecture, all of a sudden there's going to be a lot more things that are going to be changing. There's going to be a lot more things that you're going to want to be able to pay attention to make sure that those changes are actually good for your application and your environment. So it's a nice trend because from a business perspective, you're going to start to be able to address customer and user concerns faster. You're going to be able to make the product people really happy because you can add more features faster, but it also means faster, lots more changes, lots more things, lots more metrics to be able to that you'll have to watch over.
Yeah, and having the visibility, the key for making that migration from a monolithic into a microservices based application is really having that visibility into all the different components, right? You'd want to make sure that if you decide to make that move, you don't lose a lot of the observability of that monolithic application when you move into microservices.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And on top of that, there's more people that are responsible for taking a look at those metrics, right? It's not just up to the ops team. You can't just throw stuff over the wall to the ops team anymore. Everybody that's implementing code and pushing it out is now responsible for their own code. They also have to take a look at what's going on and keep track of, is it good or bad, so then they can make the appropriate changes. So you have lots of people, lots of changes, lots of code. It's a lot to take in. But I think it's worth it, right, Russ? Because at the end of the day, the customers are going to be able to offer a much better service.
Yeah, exactly.
The second trend that we're seeing is the move from, we call it from mainframe to containers, and actually it's more like servers or VMs to containers. I don't know that there's a ton of people still on mainframes, but there are some real legacy applications that are out there, and which is great because now, containers solve so many wonderful things in order to support these continuous delivery initiatives, where you don't have to deal with, you can ensure that environmental things are the same. So when I'm actually writing something, I, as a developer, can feel pretty good that my container is going to have the same environment as my buddies sitting next to me. But the flip side is with containers, now you have more stuff, more containers that are getting spun up, more things that are going to, actually not have a very long life cycle, but still they need to be viewed, they need to be monitored so that you can understand what's actually going on into that environment. So layering that on top of that first trend, there's even more stuff that we have to track in order to ensure performance. Anything to add on that, Russ?
No, I think just in my experience, I think everyone has had this where you put together an amazing application and you send it over to another developer to try to execute, and for some reason it doesn't work. You can't get it started, and you've sat there for hours trying to debug these environmental issues. And containers solve a lot of that really well. So I think if you haven't already moved there, they're going to continue to increase in popularity going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then finally, this may or may not impact you, but maybe you're helping to build a solution that's actually monitoring a bunch of sensors that are used in IoT land. The more you look around, the more we're seeing that everything is trackable nowadays. The solar panels on the top of buildings, your thermostats in your house, your light switches, you name it, manufacturing. There's so many things that have a sensor attached to it, and they're all designed so they can start to collect information so that you can determine how well is that piece of equipment, how well is it performing, does it need maintenance, and it's all in order to make sure that you can extend the life of those devices or even make them more efficient, right? I think you've probably heard of a number of trucks now also have sensors on them, so that they can make sure that they can, go at the right speed limit in order to, and also follow their colleagues as close as they can without being, of course, too close, in order to save costs on gasoline as they're going across country, hauling a lot of the goods that we buy. So this is all great, but there's all of a sudden tons and tons and tons of data that's being collected from all these different sensors. And it can be a bit overwhelming, but you definitely want to be able to, try to figure out how can I collect that, how can I make meaning of that, and not just store it somewhere and not do anything with it.
Yeah, exactly. And when we think of IoT, a lot of people are thinking of the Fitbits and the smart home components, but we have a lot of customers that in the agriculture or the industrial area that are deploying thousands, tens of thousands of sensors across their fields or across their machinery, and they want a quick and reliable way to capture all of the individual data and figure out when things are going wrong and really have visibility into that information in real time. And so certainly a huge area that we're seeing a ton of growth in.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. So the other thing that's happening with our customers in that area is that once they start collecting the data and they're able to determine performance on the individual devices, they are actually taking that next step and also trying to understand what other things are happening with their fleet of sensors or fleet of things that they're tracking. And they're actually able to make other improvements to their processes, to their products, and even offer more interesting products or services to their customers. So an example that comes to mind is we have a customer called B-Box that sells a kit that includes a battery and a solar panel, and they sell these this as a service to people in rural Africa. And initially it was they included Influx Data because they wanted to track to see how well the batteries were performing, how well the solar panels were performing. But over time they were able to see some trend data that let them realize that people use these things at night, and they had initially informed their customers to turn them off at night so that they could conserve the battery and then use it in the daytime. But people were leaving them on at night because they wanted to have lights because they are in rural places, and for safety and security reasons they wanted to leave them on. So after studying that data, they realized, hey, here's an opportunity for us to be able to extend our service, make our customers happy, keep them safe, and it's just good business practice. So it goes beyond just just collecting the metrics and just triaging. You can really start to make some improvements in your service. So let's move to the next slide, Russ. Do you want to start with that, Russ?
Yeah, so there's a ton of challenges that our customers continue to face when we talk to them, right? And one of the biggest ones is, and this happens in a lot of organizations, is that your monitoring solutions kind of grow organically over time, right? And as you bring in different technology, you bring in different applications, you start having many different monitoring solutions in place, right? Some that are monitoring infrastructure, some that are monitoring applications, and some that are focused on business processes. So we see a lot of customers that one of their big challenges is trying to get all that information into a single location and really trying to have one kind of source of truth for all of that information, right? And the reason, when they actually dig in, the reason why there are so many different monitoring solutions is that each individual solution has limitation, right? Limitation of the ability to create different aggregates and different visualizations that are important to the business, right? Or really expensive or really restrictive data retention policies. And so all these different solutions have been brought into organizations to kind of meet different needs, but they all have different limitations. And a lot of cases, and I've had this in my career, just trying to figure out how to get access to the metrics that I need can really be a struggle and really take. I remember the previous company, it took about 6 hours of meetings in order to find the person to give me access to the specific metric that I needed, right? And so that can be a real bottleneck for improvements. The other huge challenge is around capacity planning, right? And so thinking about you need access to all of these different solutions. You need to bring all that information together to understand how to plan for the future, right? How many servers am I going to need? How many resources am I going to need? How many dollars am I going to need? Right? And all of that calculation, when you're using different solutions, can be really manual, right? It can be very time-consuming, and so that that means that capacity planning happens less often, and that means that your business is less able to really be agile and really adjust to changes quickly, right? And that also means if you've got many different systems, you're collecting new metrics is also time-consuming, right? Adding a single metric into a system can take months, and that means that people get frustrated. People don't add the metrics that they really need in order to do their job, and it slows down the overall process. And so these are just some of the main challenges that our customers are facing when they're when they talk to us looking for a solution to solve all of these.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, so sometimes when you think about the new metrics that you want to collect, maybe these are metrics that are maybe a little bit short-lived. Maybe these are things that you may not want to collect over a long period of time, but you have a suspicion that it's causing some kind of issue in a certain part of your code. And so you want to be able to collect that, and once that's resolved, maybe it's not something that you need to collect. But being able to do that very quickly can often be very challenging in these traditional environments. And then also, we have to ask ourselves, of all the monitoring solutions that we may already have in place, and I've been guilty of this as well, we have these beautiful dashboards, we're monitoring all this stuff, but is it really doing the job? So it might be monitoring stuff, but is it really helping us to identify or even predict that something's going to go wrong so that we have enough time to address it? So I think it's a challenge that we've all faced at some point. So after considering these challenges and also thinking about what are the changes happening in the landscape, and also talking quite a bit with our community and with our users, we came up with a maturity model that's probably similar to what you see with any kind of a maturity model. It's a really simple 5-step process where we just wanted to start with the basics. And I think with any kind of monitoring solution, the first thing you have to do is collect the data. We're all doing that. We're all very good at that. And then the second step is, once you have that data, then you want to be able to do something with the data, right? You want to take a look at it, correlate it, see if you can use to triage the issue that your customers are seeing or that your employees are faced with. And oftentimes, we get stuck in these first 2 steps because there's just so many things, so many fires that we're trying to fires that we're trying to eliminate. And a lot of times we don't get to these other steps, but we feel that it's important to, if you know the path that you want to get to, and we can see it in front of us, and we can start to take the correct steps to get to that point where we can reach, the nirvana, or the ability to be able to predict how our applications, our systems, etc., are going to do, at least as close as we can. So in this model, you can see the third step that we have is, now that we have experience with collecting and triaging, then we can identify trends. And I think a lot of us have been doing this. That's how we oftentimes set thresholds and alerts. But we want to also start to look at things that are outside of just the normal kinds of metrics. You know, what other metrics, what are the combination of things that could have a severe impact on user experience? And I always keep in mind, you know, user experience. We've got to remember, you know, who is it that's clicking that button, or who is it that's trying to walk through some kind of a buying process that we have in our application, and are they feeling any kind of pain? And pain for users, and just put yourself in the user's shoes, can be anything from things are just slow, or, you know, things aren't behaving correctly, or, you know, wrong kind of data is being popped up. There's a lot of things that can happen, and it's going to be hard for us to identify those trends, because back when we were talking about the changes, we're making so many changes so quickly to our apps and to our environments. But it's important that we take the time to try to identify those in this model. And then once we have that, then it's about, okay, what are we going to do next? So if we can set those thresholds to understand that this is a dangerous trend that we're entering into, we need to then notify either people or systems and do something about it. And ideally, we want to get to a point where, if we can, we want to have it be, you know, kind of self-healing. And it could be something as simple as maybe it's a failover to something, so then we can really address it a couple hours later. Or we just want to make sure we don't leave these poor users stranded. And at the same time, we make sure that we can do something about the issue. And then finally, we want to get to that point where we can do that predictive analysis. And I know it probably sounds very marketing-ish, but if I go back to that B-Box scenario, you know, now what they started doing with their data is they can actually start to predict based on events in the world. So in rural Africa, you know, soccer games are really important. So they are now able to, you know, ascertain, okay, how much service is going to get consumed, how many of these batteries or solar panels might have some problems because there's some important soccer game that's coming up, and that's going to eat up a lot of the energy of these devices. Can they now do something about it? There's a solar eclipse that's happening. Will that have an impact on, you know, all these devices? They're at that point now where, you know, they're able to better triage their products, and they're getting more into that predictive analysis. And it really is making an impact with their users, because instead of their users opening up a ticket, the company is able to now go to the users before these things happen and offer, you know, additional services to them. So this is just the our kind of a step to achieving this.
Yeah, and I think if anyone who's on the webinar here, you know, I think if you think back to some of your existing monitoring that you have in place, you've probably behind the scenes gone through a lot of these steps. You know, maybe not you know, written them out like this. But if you're thinking about where you are today and where you want to be in the future, kind of breaking these components up into their individual phases can be really helpful in helping you create a roadmap to get you from, you know, maybe the first two stages where you're just collecting and fighting fires into some of those later stages, right? And so breaking your roadmap down into individual steps, you know, gives you kind of a path forward, which can be really helpful in organizations.
Okay, so let's go in a little bit deeper, Russ.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, I think step one, collecting the data, right? We've all looked around at different applications, different systems, different infrastructure, and seen all of the different metrics that you can collect, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. But the first step is really to take a look and do an inventory of the information that you're collecting today, right? And you know, that's kind of just your starting point, knowing what you have available that you can collect. But I think the thing that a lot of people miss is really asking themselves, why are they collecting the data, right? Why are they collecting a certain metric, right? What is the goal, right? And so when we're talking to customers about how to, you know, really improve their monitoring, we like to think about some of the goals of the business and kind of start at higher level goals, right? I want to increase customer satisfaction, or I want to drive sales, or anything like that, right? And really back our way into you know, making sure that the metrics that we start collecting are really all going towards one of those higher level goals in some way, right? And there may be a couple different steps to understand how monitoring CPU is really going to increase sales, but it can be really helpful to make sure that you're collecting the right information, right? The next step when you're looking at collecting all of this information, right, is thinking about how you're collecting the data, right? Are you collecting it from different file locations that are hard-coded somewhere? Are you using specialized agents running on all of your machines, right? Is the data being pushed directly into your metrics or your monitoring system, or are you reaching out and pulling those metrics on a regular basis, right? A lot of people are kind of arguing one versus the other, but when we talk to customers, you really need both. There are some systems that work better pushing events whenever they happen, and there are some systems that are good enough to pull on a regular basis, right? And so you've got an inventory. You're looking at the different metrics and how they kind of roll into your overall goal. Now, what are you missing, right? What are the things that you're flying blind on, right? Where can you really add different pieces of the infrastructure that maybe are black boxes today? How do you get access to those, and what are you missing in order to achieve those goals that you've identified?
Yeah, and it's kind of a funny thing. Sometimes when you take a look at what you're collecting today, sometimes we get really attached to it. But when you ask yourself, is it doing anything? Is it going to help me achieve this goal of making things better? We have to make sure we kind of detach ourselves, right? It's just a bunch of data that we're collecting. If it's not doing its job, we should question: is it worth having these beautiful dashboards, but it's not really helping? But it's a funny thing that I've done it myself, where I'm like so attached to this data, and I'm a little bit afraid to put it aside and realize maybe it's not doing its job and look at something else that could actually help.
Right. Yeah. One of the signal to noise ratio in a lot of these metrics, right, is if you're collecting 100 metrics but you're only using 3 or 4, the noise in all of your data coming in can be you can miss a lot of stuff, and so it's really important to as Chris mentioned, really keep track of the metrics that are important and the ones that really drive towards your goals as an organization. The next step 2, really correlate the data and triage, right? So you have the metrics that you are either collecting or you want to collect. You've started ingesting that data. Now you want to understand a little bit more about the data. Understand data coming in with different frequencies, different time range from different sources. Really start to establish kind of baselines. To really understand, is this normal for the system to be outputting this information, right? Is it normal for it to be operating in this CPU percentage or in this disk percentage? Is it normal for my network traffic to look like this? And really start establishing those baselines for the basic availability, right? And I think as you go through each of these steps, it's one of those the more you learn, then you can go back and figure out what are the things that you're still missing, right? As you start looking at baselines, you look at, oh well, I know this particular metric, but if I had this additional information, it would really help me in understanding what the normals are. And so don't be afraid to go back to previous steps and collect additional information, or get rid of additional information if it's not useful. Yeah. And again, this is really to identify different kind of the level setting of where normal operation is for your business, for your application, for your organization, for planning for the future.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people just overlook that different frequencies can sometimes make a real big difference. I don't think it's good enough to look at metrics at a per minute basis, and I even question if sometimes per second is even working. And in some situations, if you're measuring things like gas pressure, water pressure, I mean those you may only see spikes at the nanosecond level. So you do have to kind of play around with these the different dimensionality data as Russ articulated.
Yep, exactly. And then step 3 is really about identifying trends in the data, right? So now you've started collecting, you've started to see what a normal operating procedure is for the past week, the past month, however long it makes sense. Now you can start identifying trends in that data and becoming a little smarter, right? So these trends would really establish thresholds for building out your alerting infrastructure. Figuring out what your levels are that are appropriate, and understanding, oh, is this steadily increasing? Is this steadily decreasing? Does this have does it look like it goes up over the course of a day and then suddenly drops? What are these trends that are happening, to figure out, are there things that we need to fix or resolve right now, right? And really kind of establishing, is it critical when it gets into 60%? Is it critical when it gets into 80%? Or is it okay if it jumps all the way to 100? You never know. So establishing those thresholds for alerting can be really important.
And I think it's also don't be afraid to also kind of talk with your colleagues. Or there's probably other people within the organization that might have experience with this stuff as well. I think it's easy to just do this, alone in an isolated manner. But we're constantly talking, with each other to try to see, is this the right trend? Are we going down that right path? And just question everything, but question it with the team, because the collective can actually come up with some pretty cool ideas.
Yep, exactly. And then step 4, right? And I think we've been building to this, obviously, and a lot of times people, our customers will try to define alerts and define notifications earlier in the process, before they've gone through and identified kind of where their systems are at and what the trends are. And they'll run into a lot of scenarios where they'll start over alerting, and they'll start notifying people when there really isn't an issue. So we like to make sure that we follow the previous steps before we get to the notifications and the actions. And it really kind of comes in 2 different steps. The first one is going to be manual, right? You're going to get paged, you're going to get notifications, and someone's going to have to, a user's probably going to have to log in and identify, troubleshoot, and figure out what the appropriate action is to take, and take that action. And hopefully along the way you're doing retrospectives and you're reviewing, what are the actions that we took, what's the additional information we need. And so, in the future you can start automating those processes, right? And the notification that the human gets has probably a lot less information than the notification that that an automated process is going to get. And so, understanding what is important, and maybe going back and collecting additional metrics that you can provide to an automated system to automate the deployment, or automate the fix, can be really important. And all of this is again, it's all designed to notify faster, and act on that faster, right? So having a system that automatically adds more servers when you hit a huge spike in traffic is going to be a lot faster than someone waking up, opening up their laptop, logging in, pressing a few buttons to do it, right? And ultimately better for your customers.
Yeah, and I think you actually touched on a really good point that I think we've all unfortunately experienced, and that's when we over notify, right? We just get inundated with all these notifications about something going down, and then your director of tells you, okay, that's it, we're shutting it down. Nobody's being it's not very useful. This whole pager thing isn't working. I don't think that's the right solution either. I think, as Russ mentioned, it's important to have regular retrospectives so you can fine-tune this notification, because it's never going to be smooth. There are going to be times where there's going to be a lot, and we just have to fine-tune them to try to figure out what's the right amount so that we could actually get notified and do something about it instead of get notified and be annoyed and then just feel overwhelmed.
Exactly. Way too many alerts is again, it's back to that signal to noise ratio, right? When you start having a lot of noise and a lot of alerts that don't mean anything, people start ignoring them, and when the one alert that comes through that's really important, that gets ignored, right? Which can be devastating. And then finally, step 5. I think this is really the place that everybody wants to get. We've seen very few customers that are actually here, but it's really the nirvana where you're actually doing predictive analysis on the data and proactively reaching out to fix and solve issues, right? And so, this one of the examples that our customers uses is, when you look at solar panels, you start monitoring their efficiency over time. And you start seeing, as dust and as debris starts piling up on top of the solar panel, they have to send out a tech to actually go and clean them, right? And so, this is really an example of, they started out just sending a tech out every 30 days, but now they can predictively determine when they actually need to send out the tech for cleaning, right? Maybe there was a lot of dust storms the past month, they need a cleaner more frequently, or maybe less frequently, and they can start to predict and optimize those behaviors to really start saving money and really optimizing performance, right? Even to the extent of optimize the scheduling for those techs so they don't have to drive back and forth across the state to do those cleanings, right? So this is really kind of the final step, using the information that you've been gathering in the previous steps to really predict and proactively fix and solve issues before they become major problems.
We actually went through the same 5 steps with our own Influx Cloud service, and just about a year ago, we would have customers collecting metrics to monitor the health of their own systems into Influx Cloud, and initially they would just run into problems. Tickets were opened, and our poor VP of product would go out of his mind trying to make sure that we close those tickets as quickly as possible. Sound familiar? We were in that kind of collect and correlate and triage phase. And then we took a couple steps back and said, okay, we need to put in better monitoring using our own solutions. And so we put in the normal kind of monitoring of how much storage was being used, what was going on. And over time, what we started doing is, as we started getting smarter about this stuff, we started to realize that we could actually use this to enhance the service. And so we actually started collecting other kinds of metrics based on that experience. So, taking a look at not only the storage, but the speed at which people were collecting metrics. Is it increasing faster all of a sudden? Is there kind of a bit of a spike happening here? Is there a danger that they're going to hit their threshold? And so then before they even get to that point, we can actually automatically notify our own customers as well as ourselves to warn them, to let them know that, hey, you're about to run out of space, but we also have a safe landing zone so that they don't just hit a wall. That we can also just kind of get them into that space where we can give them more storage, and then notify them that, hey, we're going to run into some issues and let's start working together.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's talk a little bit now about Influx Data.
Yeah, of course. We want to build products. We want to build technology that can really help with these new workload requirements. And so when we're building out Influx Data, we've focused a lot on the requirements for this new workload of metrics data coming in, right? Which means we've got our system is really optimized for a high volume of real-time writes of both regular and irregular events, right? So things that happen every second or every millisecond, or things that happen, sometimes it happens a minute, sometimes it goes by 3 or 4 minutes before anything happens, and really optimizing for those. And also, a lot of times this data, you don't need to keep it around for very long, maybe a week, maybe a month. Really optimizing the expunge of data that isn't useful anymore, right? And along with that, right, we've built a system that's really optimized for time-based queries. The queries that you're using are always going to be looking at data over time to understand where the spikes are happening, where the anomalies are happening, and building a system that's optimized for those types of queries where you can do the aggregation, you can do larger scans and return a ton of data if you need to really fine-tune and really get the information that you need to resolve a problem. That's what InfluxDB and Influx Data is really about. Also providing that ordering, that ranking, that limiting, so you can really hone in on the information that you need. And along with that, right, for modern DevOps, you need the scalability, you need the availability, and so the system is designed to be distributed and to be fast and consistent and always available, so that your team can really get access to the data that it needs in real time without flying blind, right? And those are kind of the key places where InfluxDB and Influx Data really focus and really shine. And the way that we think about our Influx Data platform is really kind of breaking this down into three different stages, right? And so along with the actual storage of the metrics, the first thing that we talked about is collecting, right? And so accumulating that information into the system, having tools available to do that. And we have an open source Telegraph agent that we use. It has over 100 different plugins. You can also write your own. That was one of the first things I did when I joined is wrote my own plugin for ingesting data, and really allows you to bring that data in quickly and easily into Influx, right? And once it's in the database, you want to be able to analyze and query it fast, right? And that's where our IFQ or our Influx query language, which is a SQL-like query language. So if you're familiar with SQL, it's really easy to jump in and start analyzing the data, right? And then we have another component called Chronograph that we use for dashboarding and visualizations. A lot of our customers use that. We also have plugins into popular dashboarding tools that you can leverage as well if you already have a dashboarding tool that's your favorite. And then acting on that data, right? So that's where we have a tool called Capacitor, which is really a coprocessor for our database that can run analysis over the data and figure out when to notify you via Slack or PagerDuty or tools that you're probably already using, right? So so finding those anomalies, finding those issues, and alerting the right people, we use Capacitor for that. So those kind of three components. Influx Data as a platform, we have what we call the tick stack. So the T is for Telegraph, the ingestion agent. I is for InfluxDB, which is our storage and query engine. We have Chronograph, which is an admin and a management tool, all web-based, and also a dashboarding tool. And then we have Capacitor, which again is that analysis and notification system, that a coprocessor for the database.
Awesome. So let's just share with you some of our the use cases of our users and customers. So we have 3 DevOps use cases that we'd like to share today, and it was based off of conversations with these customers as well as many others that we came up with that 5-step model. So Nordstrom, as many of you guys know, is big. They have retail stores all over the country, but they have a huge online presence, and they have their very famous annual sale, where their websites get hit pretty hard. In fact, a lot of the girls, even in our office, are now doing the pre-sale shopping, and really just, I feel like they live on that website looking through all the things. And it's a pretty big event for them, so it's really important for Lisa and her team to be able to make sure that they can understand that how well their application, in their case, their web-based shopping cart is performing, and also they need to determine, based on the volumes that they expect, how well is it going to do, and are they going to be able to make sure that they can get people through that shopping cart process as smoothly as possible for the purposes of revenue generation. So they started with the Influx Data open source projects, and they are currently on our enterprise product, and they felt that it was an important product to use because of some of the things that sorry about that Russ articulated, with the rich retention policy, as well as being able to have a solution that's fast and uses little space as possible. Sorry, next slide, please. I have a little bit of a cold, I'm sorry. So Koopa is another perfect DevOps case, and congratulations to them. They just got listed on the NASDAQ, and they have a SaaS solution where they help enterprises with spend management. So if you were to buy, I don't know, scissors or tape or whatever kind of products you need within your organization, obviously not that simple, there's more complicated things that people buy with their solution, they can help manage that. So employees can buy the things that they need to get their job done. It hits the budgets, and all the money flows through to be able to make sure that they can track and keep their spend within line. The cool thing about this customer is that Sanket, who's their VP of Cloud, really took the time to sit down with their executive team to articulate, what is a business goal that we're trying to achieve that he could bring to the team. And so they felt that, in order to hit their revenue goals, they really needed to get to a near 100% uptime. And then when he, sat with his team to, articulate how are we going to get to that, they actually took the time to take inventory of what they were collecting, really look at their processes, and look at all their products and monitoring solutions that they had in place, and made some tough decisions about what to drop and what to keep. And then what they also did, I think very successfully, is they actually took all those learnings, they brought it back to the executive team to help them understand what it would take to get to that 100% uptime. And so they really became a very nice partnership, and I would even say that they did a good job of really articulating to their finance team, so that having that budgeting conversation with them is definitely a lot easier. So they chose Influx Data because they were on multiple point solutions, and they kind of surprised themselves and actually eliminated most of them, and are using primarily Influx Data for their monitoring across the board for infrastructure and application, etc. They were really impaired with their previous SaaS solutions. They weren't allowed to access the data whenever they wanted to. There was some really strict data retention policies that they couldn't modify, and things were just locked down, and the lockdown hurt them in their forecasting processes. So in order to do forecasting, they needed to have access to that data, and they just didn't have access. So they were frustrated with that. And then they also wanted to be able to collect custom metrics on the fly, and similar to the experience that Russ had, they found out they had these weird processes in place where you just couldn't do it by yourself. You had to go through these ridiculous meetings, ridiculous steps to be able to just add more metrics that would help with them achieving their company's goal. And then finally, I mentioned already that the capacity planning was manual and complex, and a lot of that was due to where the data was stored. So they chose Influx Data, and they also feel pretty strongly about mapping out what they're trying to achieve with their executive team. And then finally, we have NewVoiceMedia, who basically is a call.
Chris, are you on the line still? I think we may have lost you.
I'm still on
You're
the
still
line.
on,
Can you guys
Russ? Okay,
hear me?
all right. Yeah, great. So,
Okay, I can take over for Chris then.
yeah, okay, all right. You want to go ahead and go through this, or we can just move straight on to audience questions?
Yeah, just really quick. We'll wrap up. We'll wrap up
Okay,
here.
go right ahead.
Yeah. You know, New Voice Media. You know, again, just another use case where really wanted to get the high resolution data into their system. They really wanted to support their 5 nines uptime guarantee. And they really wanted control over all of their different retention policies and their roll-ups. And so what they really liked about Influx and the platform was they really had the ability to collect data from any of the systems that they had, even custom applications that they were building, and they could also connect into a lot of the legacy systems that they were using to bring all of that data into one place. And really understand and improve their service.
Sorry about that. I just fell off.
No problem. We were just finishing up. So so again, just going back to this monitoring maturity model, just to wrap everything together. Really breaking your metrics collection down into these 5 individual steps. Can really help you build and plan out a roadmap to, really take a tough look at where you are today in your metrics and monitoring capabilities, and where you want to get to as an organization, right? How do I move from the first 2, collect and correlate and triage, firefighting, into some of the more DevOps Nirvana use cases where you're notifying and automating and predicting when things are going to go wrong. For your system and your customers. And yeah, and I think that wraps it up for our presentation.
Okay.
So thank you guys all for joining and listening, and we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Yeah, we have gotten some questions in. It's not too late, though. If you have a question for Russ or for Chris, feel free to use that control panel and just type your question in. And we'll get to as many as we can before the end of the session here. First one is from, I think it's Benir, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name. But the question is, what is the best analysis within APM to be conducted in DevOps environment? Prediction with local agents, or the ability of deep learning analysis of application machines?
Well, it seems like a really specific question. So I won't comment too much on the best way to do it. What we've seen our customers leverage is both. I don't know if I haven't seen too many customers going down the deep learning route, but certainly trying to combine the 2 different techniques to really get to where the problems are in their application can be really powerful. So I don't know if I have a clear winner or one or the other, but I think both techniques can be useful for teams trying to identify bottlenecks or issues with their applications.
Okay, great. Next question is actually kind of along the same vein. Jason is asking, do you have AI machine learning on your current or future roadmap?
Yeah, so we've definitely thought about AI and machine learning. It's something that a lot of people talk about and a lot of people want to do. We haven't seen too many people actively using that in their monitoring and alerting. But we are starting to see an increase, and so I think that's something that we're looking at building into Capacitor, and really our analysis tool for doing those types of works. So you can already create custom functions and extend those different capabilities, but we are looking at ways to include those techniques into the system.
All right, great. Doing a quick time check here. We're about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, so there is still a few minutes. If you have a question for either Russ or Chris, go ahead and send it in. Our next question is, how is Influx Data different from Splunk or Elasticsearch?
Yeah, so when we encounter a lot of customers that are using both systems. Splunk and Elasticsearch, they're kind of best in breed for their log analysis and log searching capabilities. And so when you really want to bring in large amounts of unstructured textual data, those systems can be really powerful. We have seen them starting to do more and more metrics and monitoring capabilities, but at their core, they were really designed for log analysis. And so, we see a lot of customers standing up both and leveraging us for some of the real-time monitoring, alerting of structured metrics data. And then, if there's more investigation that they need to do into the different problems that are arising, using Splunk or Elk for analyzing some of those logs and looking at the individual stack traces that are causing the problem. So I think there's room for both. It's not an either or. We really kind of are really focused on ingesting large amounts of structured metrics data really quickly and running that analysis really quickly, whereas those tools are really focused on bringing in large amounts of unstructured text log data and running analysis on there. So great tools for what you need to use them for, and we find a lot of our customers leveraging both.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more question here. What kinds of agents do you have to support collecting metrics?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we manage the Telegraph open source Telegraph agent, and so that has plugins for monitoring all sorts of things, from network traffic, different Docker containers, infrastructure tools that you use. So it has over 100 different plugins. And a lot of times, when I've talked to customers, if for some reason one of the plugins doesn't meet their needs, it's open source, so they can always tweak and change the code if they need. But it also has the ability to execute scripts, and so if your team is more comfortable, writing Python code to collect metrics and bring that data in, you can use the Telegraph agent to execute a script that you've written. So a lot of different ways that you can bring data into the system, but we use Telegraph, and we recommend our customers use that as well.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all the time that we have for our questions today, but I would like to thank everybody who did submit a question. If we did not get to your question, please know that the Influx Data folks do have all of the questions, and so I'm sure somebody will be more than happy to follow up with you post-event. So as I said before at the beginning, today's session has been recorded, so if you missed any or all of the presentation, you'll be able to access it on demand. You should be receiving a link after the event, not too long after the event actually, that will send you to the webinar on demand as well as the slides. The event also will be posted on demand on DevOps.com, so you can always check the website there for that. Also check the site for upcoming events that we have. We've got a ton of them, so hopefully there'll be a couple there that will pique your interest. There's a couple call to actions there on your screen there. I see the influxdata.com website. Russ, did you want to speak to either one of these real quick?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, our software is open source. You can go to Influx Data, download the entire stack, play around with it, get it set up to collect information, see how it works in your environment and for your use case. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the community. Really strong community there, and our dev team is constantly monitoring that. And yeah, hopefully we can help you achieve your DevOps nirvana. So thank you.
All right, great. Well, Russ Savage, Chris Trillo, thank you both for joining me today on this webinar. And thank you, everybody who logged on to attend, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day.